Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach for Maine Woodland Owners. We are a state organization that works with woodland owners from sizes of 10 acres to 1,000 acres, and we can provide the resources and information that woodland owners look for to manage their forests. Today, I'm very pleased to have Colleen Teerling. She's works for Maine Forest Service in the Insect and Disease Lab, and she was just telling me that her main focus in her work is on monitoring and keeping track of two of our forest pests. And one of them being emerald ash borer, which is what we're going to be talking about today. We have a growing issue with EAB, which is what we call it for short, and it's growing each year. We're finding that it is making its way through the state. Right now, we see it in the most southern part of the state and in the most northern part of the state. But it's important that everybody in the state is vigilant about keeping a track and monitoring for EAB. They are mostly found on white ash, I believe. Colleen, maybe you can correct me, or is it
all species of ash?
All species of ash. And I was just talking to Colleen about how important it is that our landowners in the state are well aware of what these pests look like, what they can do, and keeping an eye out for those pests, even if they haven't been found in your area. So today, Colleen's going to be talking about the work that she's doing in her office and how she works with landowners and how you can plug in and be part of the network of landowners who are serving as monitors and keeping the spread at bay. So hopefully, Colleen, I did your topic justice, and I'm again pleased to have you here. And just to let everybody know, if you have questions that you would like to ask Colleen, as she had said, she'd be happy to have you jump in and ask them during her presentation. You can do it of a couple different ways. You can send, I noticed people have been sending a chat, so it looks like you've figured out chat. That's a great place to send a question. I'll be keeping an eye on those, so send them out to everyone so we can see the questions, but I'll be looking for them and letting Colleen know those questions are there. The other is, if you've got your video on, you can literally raise your hand, and I will keep an eye out for that as well and call on you. And at the end of the presentation, we'll probably be more able to have people just jump in and ask their questions. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass over the mic, I guess you could say, over to Colleen and have her jump in with her presentation. Thank you again, Colleen, for being here.
Okay, thanks, Jen. I am going to share my screen and so do you guys see that?
Yep, it's there.
Okay. So I am going to be talking today, not in general about emerald ash borer, but more specifically about our Girdled trap tree program, what it is and why we do it, and what its strengths are. And how you guys as woodlot owners can be involved in this. And I do want to mention we have a brand new template that we were just given to try to synchronize all of the talks given by everybody in the department. And there have been a few glitches as I tried to shift my talk over to it. And so it's entirely possible that things will go a little bit glitchy, and in which case I apologize and we'll work around it, talk around it. So trap trees. Basically, a trap tree is one of the methods that we use for monitoring for emerald ash borer. We have a number of things that we do use. We use just sort of visual monitoring, looking for signs of like woodpecker feeding and bark splits and crown decline, various things. That can be really useful, but we often don't find EAB until it's been in an area for a few years and the trees are actually starting to decline and die. We have something called biosurveillance, which is a little non-stinging wasp that tends to live in baseball diamonds. And it hunts native buprestans that are related to emerald ash borer. But when and that is a really sensitive method, and these wasps are really good at finding emerald ash borer. But the downside of that is we only can do this in places where the colonies of this wasp already exist. They tend to live, as I said, they tend to live in baseball diamonds, and that's only in the southern part of the state that they live. So that's, that's got limited value. We also do trapping. We have purple traps. You probably have seen them. They're we hang them in ash trees. Some of them look like great big purple kites. We also have some green funnel traps that we use. Those are good. They're not terribly sensitive, but we can put them out all over the state, and we can put them out by the hundreds or the thousands. So that's the strength of them. But girdled trap trees are probably one of our most sensitive methods of monitoring, and they're one of our most versatile ones, and has turned out in the last few years to be really beneficial. So this is what I'll be talking about today. So how does a girdled trap tree work? A trap, when you girdle a healthy ash tree, that stresses it, and it produces a particular kind of stress, and it draws emerald ash borer in from relatively close areas within a few hundred feet. It's not going to draw them in from any distance. It's not like Japanese beetle traps. If you put a Japanese beetle trap in your front yard, you'll draw in all the Japanese beetles from your neighbors' yards, and you'll end up having more Japanese beetles. It does not work that way. It cannot draw them in from any great distance. Basically, how it works is that if EAB is already in that area, but at low undetectable levels, it will draw EAB in from your neighboring trees to your girdled tree. And in some cases, it actually can actually protect the other trees on your property, because instead of going to the random ash trees on your property, the EAB will tend to come to your girdled tree. And so we use this to monitor for emerald ash borer. It can also be used as a management tool. And at the end of the talk, if people are interested in that, I'm willing to talk a little bit about how you can actually use trap trees to manage EAB early on in an infestation and to protect some of your other ash trees. How we started. I just realized that we started this program 10 years ago this year. It started out, we were at a Black Ash Task Force meeting with the tribes in Maine. Somebody said, it was getting kind of frustrated, said, talk, you guys, you scientists, you always just talk and you're not really doing anything. Can't you do something about emerald ash borer? And at this point in time, EAB was a long ways away from Maine, and we didn't have a ton of money to do anything concrete. And so I went at lunch break, I went to my supervisor and said, I know we have no budget to do anything at all, but if I were to call for volunteers to help us girdle trees, and if volunteers girdled their own trees and felled their own trees and brought them into us and helped us peel them, because we have no money and not a lot of staff to do this, if we could do this on the cheap, is that something that with no budget, would you be okay with me trying to do that? And he said, yeah, go for it. So this meeting was in mid-May, and that was about the time that we needed to girdle trees. So I quickly wrote up a short article, explaining what we wanted to do and how and why. And I sent it out to the Maine woodlot owners, SWOM it was then. And you guys responded. It was amazing. And we had about close to 30 trees, I think, that very first year. And more than half of them came from woodlot owners. And so this was this amazing response. And that first year, we didn't have any equipment. We didn't have peeling tables or stands or anything like that. We had people, as you can see here, leaning their bolts of wood up against the walls, putting, peeling them on tables. It was kind of exciting. We had to, there were, because it was a brand new program and it was a new way of monitoring for emerald ash borer, and because it involved woodlot owners and basically citizen scientists. It was citizen science before that became a trendy thing. We had a lot of interest. There were news, and I think we were on TV. And so there was a lot of interest in that. And that was the beginning of it 10 years ago. And ever since then, we have been monitoring this way and looking for emerald ash borer. And the Maine woodlot owners have been a part of that every year. So I want to talk a little bit about why we want to do trap trees, the pros and the cons of girdled trap trees. Some of the downsides, and there definitely are downsides. One is that it sacrifices a tree. You have to kill a tree in order to do this. Another thing is that it's pretty labor intensive. And the results are a little bit delayed. We will girdle a tree in the spring, but it's not until the fall when we fell that tree that we actually find out the results. There are some mitigating factors. Yes, it sacrifices a tree. And sometimes I've gotten emails from people when I put on a call for people to be involved in this program. And they say, well, I've got this big, beautiful white ash tree on my front yard. And I'd be willing to be involved, but and I say, no, we don't want your biggest and your best and your beautiful tree. We don't want the tree in your front yard. But if you do have a woodlot that has trees on it, if you have trees along the hedgerow along the side of a field, a tree that you're willing to sacrifice, that could be a tree that we could use. For towns, often it is trees that are maybe in inconvenient places, and they're thinking, yeah, I want to take this tree down. Instead of taking it down right now, girdle it this spring, take it down in the fall, and then we'll get information out of it. Often woodlot owners will use ash as firewood. And if they're thinking, yeah, I want to cut down a couple of trees for firewood, well, if you can girdle them in the spring and then cut them down in the fall, we can get that useful information out of them. We can peel it. You can take them home, use it as firewood. And so that we don't want your best and your most beautiful trees. We want a tree that you're willing to sacrifice. The other thing is that when EAB does come through, and then this is particularly important for towns, but also for woodlot owners, if this is not a tree you are planning to protect with pesticides, that tree may die anyway when EAB comes through. So sacrificing a tree that might die anyway is maybe a reasonable sacrifice to get the information to monitor for emerald ash borer. It's also labor intensive. It takes a lot of work. You have to girdle trees, you have to fell the tree, and then we have to peel the tree. And that at the very beginning, there was sort of a sticking point for us because we just didn't have the budget. We didn't have the personnel to do all of this ourselves. And so that's where you guys come in. And sometimes I feel a little bit like Tom Sawyer. I don't know if you ever read the book, I think it was Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer. He had to whitewash a fence, and he managed to convince all his friends that whitewashing a fence was a whole lot of fun. And he managed to convince all his friends to whitewash the fence for him. And I sort of feel like that sometimes because I've managed to convince people to help me with this work. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but it can be a lot of fun too. And if landowners are able to girdle their trees and fell the trees and bring them in, up until this past year with COVID-19, we would have log peeling workshops in the fall, and landowners and state foresters, district foresters, all of our staff from the insect and disease lab would get together, and we would have this peeling workshop, and we would spend the day working together, and we were able to talk to you guys, and you guys were able to talk to us and to pick our brains, and it was always a really fun day of peeling logs together. And then delayed results, yeah, it sometimes is a bit of a downside to have to wait from we girdle a tree in the spring and we don't get the results till the fall. But if we're in a real hurry, we can actually hang a trap in a purple trap in a girdled tree, and we may get results a little bit earlier if time is of the essence for us. But there are a bunch of really positive aspects of girdled trap trees. One benefit is that it involves the public, and when you involve the public, you get people become invested, and they realize that they can be part of this, and it becomes public outreach as well. Anytime we have a girdled trap tree in an area where the public are, we have signs that we can give landowners to put on their trees. If it's a town tree, if it's a tree in a park, if it's a tree in a land trust or a conservation area, anywhere near a trail or anything like that, that basically explains why this tree is girdled, a little bit of information about emerald ash borer, and information for people to go to our website or phone us and get more information. And so this does become a bit of an outreach thing. And it also just allows landowners to be more proactive. They don't have to sit and wait for the state to hopefully, find emerald ash borer, monitor it. That's something they can do themselves. So a town can keep track of, is EAB on our town property? A landowner can keep track of what's happening on their land. And so that's probably one of our biggest benefits is it just allows people to be proactive and be involved and take responsibility for their own land. Another real big benefit, and this is less for you guys probably and much more for me, is that we get a lot of information from a girdled trap tree. If we get just, we find one emerald ash borer on a trap, sometimes that could be really frustrating for me if that's the only information I have, because I don't know what that means. There's one EAB on a trap. We found an EAB on a trap in Portland a couple of years ago, and we had nothing else, and we couldn't find anything else. Was that EAB just something that flew off of a piece of firewood that was traveling through the city, and there was nothing else there? Was there a big infestation somewhere that we didn't know about? And we haven't found it yet, but we caught something on a trap. We just don't really know that much. And so in Portland, when I had that one EAB on a trap, we did a bunch of branch sampling to try to find anything else. We didn't find anything else, and that made me feel a little bit better. But then the following year, in the spring, we girdled trap trees. And then that fall, we discovered, yes, we found a couple of spots where we did have positive trap trees. And that allows us then to find out a little bit more information. So because, as you can see here, for each piece of wood, each bolt of wood that we peel, we measure the diameter and the length of that bolt of wood, so we get an idea of how much area we have girdled. And from that, we can say, what kind of density of EAB is there? Are we finding one emerald ash borer per square foot of girdled tree? Or are we finding 5? And that will give us a lot more information. We also can look at old emerald ash borer signs. Is there an exit hole? That means that emerald ash borer was there before we girdled the tree, and that tells us something. Are there woodpecker holes? When we peeled some logs up in northern Maine, when we first found emerald ash borer up there, we peeled a couple of trees, and one tree that I peeled, there were 8 emerald ash borer galleries, but we had 8 woodpecker holes. And that tells us something. It tells us woodpeckers are doing a good job. It tells me I really, really like woodpeckers. And so that information, we get a lot of that information. We can find, when we do find larvae, is it a young larva that just came in after the tree was girdled? Or is it an old larva that's been there already because early on in an infestation, emerald ash borer takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. So if it was already in the tree for 1 year before we girdled the tree, and it's now an older larva, then it tells us that there was enough emerald ash borer in that area a year ago that random trees were already infested before we even girdled it. And so we get all of this information from a girdled tree, and that is hugely, hugely valuable to me as we are trying to make decisions about management and what we do and when we do it and where we do it. And so this information that we get from the trees is just invaluable. Another benefit is that it's really sensitive. It's one of our more sensitive methods of monitoring for emerald ash borer. And it gives us early detection. You probably won't find this in any of the literature yet, because I'm not sure how many other states are using trap trees in the way that we are, and using volunteers and woodlot owners to be part of their trap tree network. And so because we have this far-flung, widespread network of people, we can sometimes find emerald ash borer in places where we don't expect to find it. Now, that's not really true. We basically expect to find emerald ash borer almost anywhere in the state. There is no place anywhere in the state that it is too early to do trap tree monitoring, because we expect to find EAB anywhere in the state. We can find it anywhere in the state. But because we have all these trap trees all throughout, we sometimes find it a lot earlier than we would otherwise find it. We find emerald ash borer long before we see any visible signs, long before we see woodpecker feeding, long before we could see tree decline or any epicormic growth or any of these other signs of emerald ash borer. So we're still in Maine, we're still relatively early on in our whole emerald ash borer saga. And it's only been in the state, we've only known about in the state for 2 or 3 years. But some of our early detections, we have detected it with trap trees, at least one, and in some cases it's now been 2 years before we see any signs, any other signs of emerald ash borer. So that means that the landowners have a chance to know that they have emerald ash borer on their property long before their trees start to decline. One of the towns down in Alfred, there's a town park, and we had a trap tree just adjacent to the park, and we found emerald ash borer in that trap tree. The town was able to, they had a full year before we saw any other signs of EAB, and during that time they were able to hire a forester to come up with a plan. They were able to harvest some of their best ash trees, their veneer quality trees that they wanted to harvest. They decided they wanted to keep a lot of their other trees in the park and just let them just maintain them on the land as long as they could, because they were right adjacent to a biological control site. But they were also able to cut down the trees that were going to be hazard trees along sides of roads and along trails. And so they just had this extra time. For power companies, that's important because they know that EAB has been found there long before the trees start to decline. That gives them a little bit of time to plan about cutting down of their trees. And just as a landowner, it gives you time to make a plan if you know EAB is there. One of our woodlot owners, we found EAB there 2 years ago, and his trees still look completely healthy, but he knows that EAB is there, and so he's got all of this lead time to make decisions about what he wants to do. And then another big benefit is we're finding that this is one of the best ways for us to find biological control sites. So far, most of our biological control sites have been found with girdle trap trees. We also find that these sites really early on, and that makes our biological control much more likely to be successful. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about biological control later. But yeah, if you're at all interested in biological control in your woodlot, I would suggest that yeah, you might want to might want to put in girdled trap trees. If not every year, then maybe every couple of years,
Lighting.
just so you can keep track. Is there a question there?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. So who are our partners, all these much vaunted partners? Woodlot owners are the biggest and probably one of the most important partners. And I don't just say that because I'm talking to you guys, to the woodlot owners. This is actually a slide that I put together for the Canadian Atlantic provinces who were very interested in what Maine was doing with trap trees and how we had this partnership with various entities across the state and how we made this work for relatively small amount of money. And so you guys were number one on my list there with an exclamation mark at the end of it, because as I told them, you know, if you can get woodlot owners to be part of this network across your provinces, you will probably be much more successful because you have woodlot owners all across your regions. But we also have a lot of other partners. We have state parks and public lands. Our state district foresters have been involved in this program from fairly early on. And in all different districts, each year our district foresters will find a trap tree somewhere in their district. We have tribal foresters that are involved. Municipalities have become quite involved, from big cities like Portland to small towns, because again, this gives a town or a city the ability to monitor what's happening in their towns, and also they can use street trees that they would like to bring down, like they want to come down anyway, or they can use trees on town woodlots. We have land trusts and conservation districts and soil and water districts. Acadia National Park has been a big partner for us. And anybody who's done any log peeling at Acadia National Park knows that they feed us well when we have log peelings over there. The correctional facility, Mountain View Correctional Facility up in Charleston. They have a big woodlot with a lot of ash trees, and every year they will girdle a few ash trees, and then I come up and spend half a day giving them a lecture as part of their forestry program. I will give a lecture on invasive species, and then in the afternoon we will fell and peel their trap trees. And so every year 15 or 20 of their inmates go back out and work in the forestry field, and they go out fairly well educated on invasive species and emerald ash borer in particular, because they've been doing this. They've been peeling, and you learn a lot more when you're actually doing something rather than just when you're sitting there and being lectured at. We also have universities and colleges which will put up trap trees on their property, and then in the fall when we do log peeling, they will have students come to the log peelings. And then just general public. We often have people say, you know, I have no land, I have no ash tree, but I want to be involved, and they'll come out and help us with the log peeling. And we value that as well. So down to the nuts and bolts of what makes a good trap tree. Basically, we can use any species of ash. So black ash or brown ash is the most susceptible and the most attractive to emerald ash borer. Green ash is the next, and then white ash is the least susceptible, and probably the least attractive. You can use any species of ash that you have on your property that is true ash. I would suggest if you have, if 90% of what you have on your property is black ash, and you've got one white ash tree, it's probably not good to turn that one white ash tree into a trap tree, because black ash are so attractive to EAB that they might want to go to your black ash, your healthy black ash trees, and not your girdled white ash tree. So, but whatever species you have a lot of, you can turn that into a trap tree. You do want the tree to be healthy. I've sometimes heard people say, well, I've got a beaver beaver chewed tree that's already stressed. Why don't I just turn that into a trap tree? Or I've got a tree that's been hit by a plow and is a little bit damaged, and I'd like to turn that into a trap tree. And those actually will not work that well as trap trees. We need to have a tree that's growing really healthily and vigorously. And because that tree then has this big signature that is apparent to emerald ash borer, and so it's releasing volatiles into the air that attract emerald ash borer. When we take that healthy tree and we girdled it, we take the bark away from it, that will then stress the tree in a particular way, and it will release these particular kinds of stress volatiles that make it even more attractive to emerald ash borer. And so we also want it to be above the canopy, or at least co-dominant, so that it is open to sunlight. And if it's on an edge, so much the better, because then it will have at least, if it has at least one sunny side, we know that emerald ash borer like to bask in the sunshine. And so having a sunny tree or a sunny side makes that tree much more attractive as a trap tree. So anything that's on the edge of a field, edge of a road, edge of a trail, edge of a stream is great. We suggest that it be at least 10 inches or at least 4 inches in diameter at breast height, up to about 10 inches. It can be larger if you want. If you're felling the tree, and if you have a 2-foot tree and you want to fell that tree, that would be great. But for us, we know that it's more work to fell a really large tree, and so we tend to not go for the giant trees. There was one tree in one of the parks where they wanted to get rid of a few giant ash trees, and we had one tree that was probably about a good 2.5 feet in diameter, and but they were willing to fell the tree, so I girdled that tree for them, and they felled it in the fall, and we peeled it. It was great giant chunks that we had to peel, but it made a good trap tree. You also want it to be accessible so that you can fell the tree and bring out 3-foot chunks of it for us to peel. If it's not accessible, talk to us. If you say, I've got a good tree that I'd like to use as a trap tree, but it's not easily brought out, let me know, and we may be able to, depending on exactly where you are, we may be able to just go out and fell the tree and peel it in the field, and we have often done that. So that's certainly a possibility. And if you have it, putting a trap tree in a high risk area is a really good thing. But we do know that when we have woodlot owners, we have the trap trees wherever their woodlot happens to be, and that is incredibly important. It's important for us to have trap trees in high risk areas like near mills or near campgrounds, and we have our district foresters and our state parks. We try to put those trap trees in the high risk areas, but we also want just sort of a network all throughout the state in places that are not so high risk, and that's where the woodlot owners come in. And we know your woodlot may not be in a high risk area, but we want to have trap trees everywhere that we can. And we also know that an imperfect trap tree is better than no trap tree at all. So if your trees, your ash trees, are in the center of your woodlot and they're not on an edge and you don't have a lot of sunshine, it still is going to be good to have a trap tree there, rather than having no trap tree at all. So kind of down to the nuts and bolts, how do we girdle trees? So in the spring, we have people girdle their trees, and if you don't have the ability to do that, we often can come out and help. I like to girdle a tree with a draw shave, and that is good because you don't damage the xylem. So basically, you want to girdle a tree, you want to peel the bark off down to the cambium layer, and you keep the xylem intact, the heartwood intact, so the tree is able to still take up water all throughout the summer, and the tree stays alive all summer. But you do stress it because you've cut the phloem, and you've stopped the flow of nutrients from from the leaves down to the roots. So a draw shave is really good because you can easily peel down to the cambium layer. And when you get to the cambium layer in the spring, you can tell that because it's a nice wet layer. And once you get to the cambium layer, you can just grab handfuls of that bark and just peel it right down to the ground if you want. And there are other ways of doing it. We have people who will, as you can see here, what Butch is doing. They used a hammer and chisel to chisel through the bark, and then they're peeling the bark away from that area. If you do that, you need to be careful not to cut into the xylem, because you don't want to stop the water flow, because that can kill a tree outright. And once the tree is dead, it's no longer attractive to emerald ash borer. It has very little value as a trap tree then. The other thing I want to mention is you do need to make sure you get all of the bark. This is just a random picture that I pulled off the internet of a girdled ash tree. And that's not what we want. You can see here over my girdled tree where I peeled the bark off, for a fairly wide band. In this tree over here, there's little strings of bark that are left, and there's not a very wide area that's been girdled. And a healthy ash tree, it wants to grow. And so throughout the spring and the summer, this tree here is just going to grow back all of its bark. And in places like this, where there's strings of phloem left, they will just grow right back up over this gap. And by midsummer, I suspect this tree probably had bands of bark growing all the way up. And by fall, it was perfectly healthy. And so that tree then is not terribly stressed and not a really good and attractive trap tree. So make sure you peel back all of these little strings of bark, and as I said, if you can just grab the bark and peel it right back with your hands, you've done a good job. So that's what happens in the spring. And then in the fall, we end up cutting the trees down and taking bolts of the tree for peeling, for peeling and looking for emerald ash borer. So all throughout the summer, that tree will be standing, be releasing all these stress volatiles, and any emerald ash borer that happen to be in this area will be coming to the tree. Then in the fall, we will send information to you about how to cut down the tree. We usually, in the past, we've done it as late as February and even March sometimes, where we've been moving earlier and earlier. And this last year, we peeled our trees in October and November, and that is actually a lot easier for people to get access to their trees, before the snow flies. And so we're going to try to keep doing it earlier in the autumn. We will send out a letter with instructions about when to peel. We prefer you cut the tree just before you peel it, because that allows it to be so much easier to peel the bark off of it when the tree is fresh, or when the bolts are fresh. Ash dries out so very quickly. And we ask that you will, however many inches in diameter at breast height your tree is, we would like that many 3-foot bolts plus one. So if this, our example tree here is 6 inches in diameter at breast height, we would like 7 bolts. So we will, and this will all be explained in an email we send out to you. We'll take 1 bolt from the base of the canopy, the base of the crown, and then the rest of the bolts we'd like to take further up into the crown, because we have learned that EAB tends to start out fairly high up in the crown, rather than down at the base of the tree. And so just go up the tree and take 3-foot bolts. And if you run out of crown and there's not enough larger stems to cut your bolts, you can always start taking bolts further down from the main stem as well. And make sure you label every bolt, because I can't think of much worse than finding emerald ash borer in a tree somewhere and then not knowing where it came from. And so usually people just label it with their initials. So we do have, if you go to maine.gov/EAB, that is our emerald ash borer website. And to go down a little further, you can get to a link to our trap tree site. And there's a lot of information, a lot of information there. And if you're at all interested, you can go take a look at that. So if you are interested, email me. There's my email there. There's also a link to foresthealth.gov that on the maine.gov/EAB website. That will also get to me. Take a look at the web page, maine.gov/EAB, and then there's the tab towards the bottom of the page that says Surveillance, Outreach, and Involvement. Click on that, and that will take you to our Girdled Trap Tree page network, or I think it's Girdled Trap Tree network page. So once you have signed up, if you've emailed me, I'll put you on our email list. And late April, probably early May, I will send out an email to everybody who has indicated some interest or that they might be interested, and I will send you more detailed instructions about how to choose a tree. If you need help with girdling, or if you need help with felling a tree, we'll have you contact us and let us know about that, and then we can give you a hand almost certainly. But we do need to know where you are, and just to make sure that we have personnel in your area that can help with that. So then you'll girdle your tree. There's an online form to enter your information about the tree, where you are, how big the tree is, the coordinates or the address of where your tree is. And then in the fall, we will send out information again with felling instructions. In the past, we have had, as you have probably seen some of the pictures of everybody coming together and at these trap tree workshops, or peeling workshops, where we all work together peeling the trees. Last year, we were not able to do that because of COVID. This year, I'm not entirely sure what is going to happen. We may have some outdoor peeling opportunities that people may be able to be involved in. We're talking about possibly being at Wickapee Woods for the forestry days. And we may have a peeling station there that people can bring their trees, their bolts of wood in, and can be involved in helping us peel if they would like. So that's a little bit up in the air. It's going to depend on just what the whole pandemic situation was like in the autumn. But one way or the other, we'll get you to fell the tree and either bring the bolts in for us to peel, or bring them into a workshop of your choice if you would like to peel them. So we have various collection spots and or workshop spots throughout the state, depending on where you are. So that's a large part of what I wanted to say about trap trees. I did realize that I haven't mentioned some of the basic things about where emerald ash borer is in the state. Basically, EAB is in the far northern corner of the state, up in the far northern corner of Aroostook County in Madawaska, and about 3 of the neighboring towns of Madawaska. That's a fairly small infestation that's growing fairly slowly. Down in southern Maine and York County, moving into Cumberland County, and just recently up into southern Oxford County, there we have this giant infestation of coming from basically the rest of eastern continental United States. this giant wave of EAB that's moving into southern Maine, and that's moving and spreading a lot faster. But as I said, we are looking for trap trees anywhere in the state because EAB could show up anywhere. But I did want to mention just a little bit, I've got a bit of time still, I want to mention a little bit about biological control, because biocontrol we're discovering is really quite linked to our trap tree program, because our trap tree program allows us to find EAB remarkably early on sometimes. And that means that biological control will have a much better chance of getting established and protecting trees. So biological control, we have 3 species of biological control. We have, so this is emerald ash borer here. And emerald ash borer is pretty small. You can see it here. It's about half the diameter of a penny. And the 3 little parasites we have are much, much smaller. They are parasitic wasps, and people hear wasp and sometimes freak out, but these are parasitic wasps. They are unable to sting, and they're really, really tiny. This is one of the species. It's one of the egg parasites. And you see that little speck, not this one in the center, but this one out here. That's the egg parasite. That's tiny, tiny little egg parasite called Ubius agrilli. This is another species we have here. This is Tetrasticus planopenisi. It's a tiny little wasp, very elegant little wasp. It works quite well on young ash trees because it's a very small wasp, and it has a fairly short ovipositor. It can't lay eggs through really thick bark. But it does follow emerald ash borer really well, and it spreads well. And so if we can get it at a site early on, as EAB spreads, it will follow EAB. And then this is the 3rd species that we've been releasing, Spathius galanae. It's a slightly larger species, and it has a little bit longer ovipositor. It's not a stinger. It cannot use it to sting. But what it does use is it kind of carefully saws into the bark. It can actually hear and feel emerald ash borer feeding under bark that's, a centimeter or half an inch or more thick. And it can saw its, or just kind of scissor its ovipositor in, and very, very accurately, it can lay its eggs right in an EAB larva. And its eggs then will parasitize the larva, killing it, which is really cool. Not macabre, but really kind of cool. And so these are the 3 parasites that we've been releasing. Both down south, and we're also starting to, up north we've been releasing them, and then down south we're starting to release them. And these parasites will not protect the trees that are standing now. Those trees will almost certainly die, especially the mature trees. However, if we get it on early, you get the EAB in early on in an infestation. If we can detect the infestation early, like we do with the trap trees, there is evidence that we can protect certainly the seedlings and potentially the saplings, and maybe even young pole-sized trees. There is some evidence that that these parasites, the numbers can build up quickly enough to offer some degree of protection to the young standing trees. The mature trees, they will almost certainly die. But the earlier we detect an infestation of EAB, the earlier we can get biocontrol in, and the more successful it's going to be. And because we are finding our EAB sites fairly early on with our trap trees, APHIS has been giving us a fair number of biological control agents, and this is something, there's a lot of competition for biocontrol. It's the federal government that gives it out to the states, and so the more and the better sites that we can find, the more likely we are to get these parasites. So if you have a stand of ash trees in your property, and so anything over 3 or 4 acres of 25% or more of ash, And if you're interested in having biological control on your property, putting in a trap tree is a good way of monitoring your property so that the moment EAB arrives there, we'll know it right away and can start releasing biocontrol. Because the earlier release it, or the earlier we release biocontrol, the more successful it's likely to be. And I think that's about all that I have. And if there are any questions, I would be very happy to take them. And I'm going to stop sharing this now.
We have a question from Ellen Peters. Ellen, do you want to unmute and ask the question?
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, do all. Oh, here she is.
Yeah, there's the question.
Yep, go ahead.
Do all buprestids kill their host trees? And what is the EAB doing to kill the ash trees?
Okay, so a good buprestid does not kill its host tree. So our native buprestids, we've got a whole lot of native buprestids. And in general, they don't kill their host trees. They are part of that suite of insects that come in on stressed trees. And most of the time, they just attack stressed trees and may help sort of finish off a stressed tree or a dying tree. There are some species of buprestids that only come in on dead trees. But the problem with emerald ash borer is it's an invasive species. And in China, where it comes from, it's not a big problem. It kills its stressed and dying ash trees, but it doesn't kill healthy ones. But it comes here, our trees have no resistance to it. And so our trees are being killed by it. So here, it can kill a healthy ash tree. But most of our buprestids don't. You can think of things like, bronze birch borer. That's a buprestid. And most of the time, it just takes out stressed and unhealthy ash trees. Sometimes it builds up to, outbreak populations and we have a bit of an issue, but most of the time they don't. And so what EAB is doing to an ash tree is they feed underneath the bark of the tree, and they create these galleries, basically just feeding on the cambium of the tree. And so you get enough of them and they feed on the cambium of the tree. There's no cambium left and the tree is basically girdled from underneath the bark.
Great. Did that answer your question? I'm going to assume that's
Yes,
good.
it did.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Larry is very good at reminding me that, and Colleen mentioned this as well, we are hosting a tree girdling demonstration in Quebec. I did post a link to our website that has the information for the event and a link to register, but it bears repeating that we are hoping that this group now is they're now hungry for more and can join us in the field to watch Colleen actually go ahead and girdle a tree on the Wickeby Woods property in Quebec. Jessica Leahy and Bob Seymour own the property. They are the Maine Tree Farmers of the Year from 2020, and we're going to have actually and Colleen already mentioned this, we're doing our Forestry Field Day in September on their property. So you come to the program on Monday and in May on the 8th, and then we will reveal the results on the Forestry Field Day on September 12th. So it's a neat way to actually see citizen science in action. And we hope that we won't find anything on September 12th because Bob and Jessica will probably not be very happy if they do on their big day. But I think we're feeling confident that they'll be clear. But I think this is a great follow-up program. So hopefully you can join us. Larry is he's our chapter leader for the chapter neighboring the Quebec event, and you just go ahead and email Larry when you click register on our website, and he'll take your information and he'll get you signed up. So hopefully everybody can join us. It'll be 9 to 12. So you will get a lot of great information. We'll also be able to walk on the property to see their ash stands. They have some really amazing ash on that property, don't they, Colleen? They seem very
Yeah.
big. And I'm not too familiar with how the species grows up here and ash wise, but it seems to me they're quite robust. So
Yeah, and then also I should probably mention that that it won't be just girdling an ash tree. We'll also be talking about ash management and the state of emerald ash borer in Maine. So it'll be focused on creating a trap tree, a girdle trap tree, and how to do it practically. But there will also be a lot of other information.
right.
So yeah.
And I think we're going to offer a little lunch at the end of the program too. So if that's not enough incentive, I don't know what is. And it will be a beautiful day, I'm sure. So any other questions for Colleen? If you'd like, turn on your video and raise your hand, or go ahead and send a chat text. Okay, well, Colleen, you posted your email address on your slide. Can you go ahead and just repeat your email address?
Yeah.
Teerling?
So it's Colleen.Teerling, as you can see here on my my name underneath my picture, at maine.gov, Maine all written out.
Great. Good. Well, yeah, feel free to reach out to Colleen. That's the beauty of Maine, among all the other benefits of being up here. The scientists and the technicians and the people on the field and on the ground on these issues are very accessible, and we appreciate it. Members are very appreciative. And so, Colleen, thank you so much for your time, your expertise. This program is going to be posted on our website, on our members page. So if you are a member, you can access our members page using the password that has been sent out in our newsletter. But you can also be in touch with me at jen@mainewoodlandowners.org to get the password if you don't have it. And Larry, thank you for reminding me again of our event and for being our chapter leader for the Penobscot Valley chapter. And thank you everyone for being here today. And we hope to see you again soon. Our next event is going to be next week, next Wednesday, on talking about bequests and how land transfers to organizations like ours and other land trusts can be a great way to plan for the future of your property, among other things. So hope to see you there. And at the end of the month, just check our website, mainewoodlandowners.org/events. You'll see our list of all of our online programs for April. Our last one of the month is going to be with Tom Doak on the legislative session. So if you're curious about what's happening in the legislature related to woodland ownership and landowners, Tom has got it all together. He's been monitoring all the different activities. So that should be a very good conversation. And I hope to see you on May 8th. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. And I hope to have a good rest of your night. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys all for coming. Thanks, Jen.
Bye-bye.